Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB pro bodybuilder. He is also the owner of Tuttle Nutrition. Today's guest is Chris Tuttle. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
For sure. So we're just going to jump right into things, Chris. I'd like to start this podcast off by just asking all of my guests two questions. The first question I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
I'm going to have to go back to more old school bodybuilders. Obviously, when you're growing up, you have a different type of way of idolizing. And I always liked Dorian Yates with his mentality. That mentality I can identify with or strive to always have. That mental toughness, that mental grit. Of course, who doesn't like Ronnie Coleman? Just the pure entertainment value, the freakishness, and his general just personality is just so different from the ordinary bodybuilder. I used to like Sean Ray, his physique growing up, but not a fan of him anymore, just due to how he conducts himself and poor run-in I had with him when I was a fan around 2004. So after that, kind of changed my mind. But those are the three that I kind of looked up to growing up through high school and such.
Cool. And I've never asked this question as kind of a follow-up question, but just kind of based off what you just said about Sean, what was it like for you, Chris? Because all of us grow up, well, you and I are around the same age now. It's a little bit different with social media, but back in the day, we kind of grew up with the magazines, right? And we saw like Jay Cutler and Ronnie had their DVDs and a few other guys had DVDs out. That's kind of how we consumed bodybuilding content in terms of being fans and stuff at that time. So what was it like for you transitioning from, being like a fan, and I'm sure you're still a fan, but being like a fan, kind of like a normal fan. And then after you became an IFBB pro and then stepping on stage with maybe some of these guys that you looked at in the magazines and looked up to growing up, what was that like? Was that kind of surreal?
Yeah, I guess you can, but you know how it is. It's for most people, it's a progression over time where that changes. It's not something where you're a fan and then within a year you're on stage with them, right? So it's kind of less, as I've gotten more into bodybuilding and further along, you almost become more in that crowd. You're friends with them, you know of them, you speak with them more, you're training at the same gym as them, you get to work out with them. It becomes more of a personal level. You have to know them that way. But it was cool. And I always, in my opinion, I actually enjoyed bodybuilding more as a fan growing up, because that excitement, sometimes the unknown, you get excited, you don't see the bad aspects of the industry or the individual. And you just have that fantasy in your mind of like, wow, it'd be nice to be there. And that excitement obviously dies off and you have a different type of excitement and pressure. But it was surreal. I think personally, honestly, the most surreal thing I've had myself was I raced motocross my whole life. And I turned professional motocross when I was 21. And one of the first professional races I did, an expert race, was a qualifying for a national. And I was racing with guys I had autographs with on my wall as a kid. For me, that was surreal because it happened fast. I mean, it took me a long time to earn that status. But once I was at that status, almost suddenly it's like, now I'm stepping into the arena with everybody else. And I couldn't believe the speed they were carrying. I was riding as fast as I could, but they were just gone in areas catching speed. I never thought you could catch speed. So that was the most surreal feeling. Bodybuilding was more of a linear progression over time into that, out of the fan into more of less, what I strive to be in.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So the second question, just to kind of kick things off, what age did you start lifting weights, and what was the reason for you to start lifting weights at that age?
It's a funny thing, actually. Just like anybody usually in their 30s, late 30s now, there's a different mentality among men growing up, was to be macho, to be strong, always wrestling each other. I bet you can't beat me in a race. I bet you can't jump over that fence. It was always competition, climbing trees, football, rugby, dodgeball, hitting each other as hard as we could, just the typical things that boys do. So growing up, being physical was always a thing, and arm wrestling in school. I remember arm wrestling all the time, elementary school, who had the best arm wrestle in the class. But really it was motocross. I loved riding dirt bikes. And when I got more and more involved in it, my parents were like, well, if you're really this involved in it and committed, we'd be willing to pay for a motocross trainer to help you ride, technique, mentality, train, and eat. And he did everything. And he put me on a kind of a CrossFit style training program, and my body responded very quickly visually. And when I was, when you're a kid, you don't, at 10 years old, 11 years old, you don't kind of put two and two together. We're like, wow, I didn't know your body responded this way from lifting weights. I didn't get that. So now that I saw that positive response, I wanted to keep lifting weights to be like a bodybuilder, but my trainer would freak out. He's like, dude, you can't be a bodybuilder and race motocross. It's like trying to become a sumo wrestler or a weightlifter and then run a marathon, be fast at running marathons. Doesn't work. So I always would try to do extra curls behind the scenes and what he wouldn't know. And I started to take more interest in bodybuilding magazines around the age of 12, 13, but I started lifting weights around 10. But like I said, it was more geared towards CrossFit style, high pace repetition, core strength, things to keep me more muscular, strong, core work, squats, cleans, things like that. And tons of intense cardio. But that's where it started. And then because of the change in physique, I wanted to bodybuild, but couldn't, but still race motocross. And I used to get made fun of at the track. People were like, dude, you come from the gym or something? Because most motocross guys are rail thin, very, very skinny, very thin. And I was still a muscular kid, even in the 80cc class amongst other people. Most kids have got a little belly going on, or they're extremely skinny. And I had abs and a chest. So that's kind of how it started. And once I finished racing motocross, it was just like full-fledged into bodybuilding.
Cool. And we're going to come back to that because I want to learn more about that. But you've already kind of touched on a little bit of the childhood in terms of motocross. It seems like that was a big influence in your life when you're younger. But just talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, where did you grow up? I believe you're originally from Connecticut, but just talk about childhood. Do you have any siblings? Did you play any other sports outside of doing motocross? Just touch on that a little bit, maybe up to high school, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah. So, I played t-ball a little bit, hockey, at elementary, wrestled. I enjoyed wrestling the most. I always was more infatuated with individual sports. I just didn't like team sports. I didn't like the idea of participation trophies, even as a kid. I remember getting a trophy at the end of the year of baseball once. And I remember saying to my dad, I'm like, Dad, I don't understand why we got a trophy. We didn't win. And he's like, oh, it's just a nice feel good participation thing. People putting good effort in. It just didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel real. I didn't like that. I wanted self-gratification of putting an effort and then getting a reward. And if your team sucks and you're a good player, then what are you going to do? It's nothing. So I wanted to venture into things that everything's on you. So wrestling was probably my favorite thing outside of riding dirt bikes when I was a kid in elementary and junior high. And that was really cool. Obviously being physical, it was so much fun just being around, all your friends wrestling, just horsing around constantly between matches and getting into trouble. But motocross was really my infatuation. I loved, ever since I was like 3 years old, I loved playing with dirt bikes. Dirt bikes was live, eat, breathe. That's all I wanted to do every day, all day. I was just obsessed and I never let it go. So my parents got me a bike when I was 4, and that's when I started riding, but that's all I wanted to do. I didn't really do anything else. As soon as my parents kind of give me support in the arena of riding dirt bikes and motocross, I didn't want to do anything else at all, ever, except ride. That was it.
What was it then about kind of riding your dirt bike and motocross? What was it, do you think, that kind of sucked you in and just pulled you in, and it kind of just grabbed a hold of you, so to speak?
I don't know specifically. I can just say I know those who are listening who do ride motorcycles do know what I'm talking about, that thrill you get. But riding and going as fast as you possibly can, and then with skill, like once you have the skill and you're able to go that fast and around a dirt bike track, jumping over jumps and doing crazy, this is the best feeling in the world. It's like when I'm riding, you're not thinking about anything else but riding. You know, you could have the most tragedy going on in your family. When you're riding and you're tearing up a track, you know, you're not thinking about anything except riding. It's probably one of those gratifying feeling things in the world. It's sad as you get older, your body just doesn't tolerate that type of abuse. Or if you fall, you're getting real hurt. You're not going to bounce back in 6 weeks like I did when I was a kid. But that's probably it. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I was interested in dirt bikes. Like I didn't like trucks. I didn't like monster trucks. When the dirt bikes came out, the monster truck events, and I was a kid, that's when I was like, that's so cool. And watching the movie Dirt Bike Kid when I was younger, I was just, I don't know what it was specifically, but as an adult going that fast and, you know, like I said, riding as fast as you can, it's the best feeling. It just feels awesome.
Love it, man. What was your kind of the family environment like? Did you have a pretty good support system then growing up and all of that type of stuff?
Yeah, I'm extremely fortunate growing up. I had very supportive parents, and into the degree of they would support me in endeavors that they didn't see interest in themselves. You know, you get some parents who are like, no, you're going to play football or you're going to do this because I played football. Dude, my dad went to Harvard. He was a track and field star, like track and field guy, played hockey. So motocross was like really foreign to him. My mom didn't play sports, but like riding dirt bikes, that her son riding over these huge jumps and breaking bones, like that's not up her alley either. But the fact that I loved it as a kid, and my parents always believed that like, or their philosophy of raising children, it's like, well, if your kid is that interested in something and he's really all about it, you should support him in that, because how many times kids get into trouble or they veer off because they didn't have a support or something that they could dive into and excel at. And because I loved it so much, I was excelling at it. The more I excelled and the more I stayed with it, the more my parents would put a few more chits in the basket. But I was very lucky in that regard. My dad would come with me to every single race on the weekends. My father was a physician. So, you know, he has a tight schedule. So obviously he couldn't be there for practice during the weeks. So he was working a lot of hours, but, you know, I rode in the woods in the backyard. I built a track myself. But on the weekends, he'd always make himself available. And if he wasn't, my mom would bring me. It's always one parent would be there with me race day when I was a kid. But I was very fortunate in that regard. Even though people would be like, they would haggle my dad. They'd be like, you're a physician and you let your kid do such dangerous sports. And my dad would make a joke and he goes, well, it makes the most sense. I can fix them. Right. Can't tell me how many times I've broken bones and I go in the house and I'm like, Dad, my wrist is broken. And he's like, all right, let's go to the office and fix it up. And he'd cast me up.
I love that. That's great. Now, one other thing I want to touch on, then we'll kind of move on from the younger years, kind of transition to college and stuff. But you're an educated individual yourself. You just mentioned your dad's credentials. I'm assuming that education was something that was stressed pretty, I would say severely in your home growing up, or am I wrong on that?
Believe it or not, no. It's like, you know how it is. Sometimes parents, both my parents grew up very poor. Okay. So they put themselves through college. My mom's a dentist. Mom put herself through college, medical school. They had accumulated all their own debt and paid off all their debt. My dad rode a bicycle between classes in college for delivering Chinese food to pay, what he could pay. And then obviously had the student debt after. But my parents were a firm believer in pushing and supporting what makes us happy as individuals versus forcing us into something that we may not want. Of course, they want us to get good grades, but it wasn't like you have to go to college, you have to be a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor. They never, ever come out of their mouth. It was more or less, let's get them exposed to a variety of things to see what they might like, and what they might like, we'll support them in that, push them in the direction, and then let them go on their own. That's the philosophy of my mom, my dad. Whether or not I know my mom's parents didn't push her to become a dentist. I know my mom's parents pushed her to make sure she can be independent on her own accord and not have to rely on anybody. And my dad's parents were kind of pushed him to be successful, like you have to be successful. So I believe they kind of want to do the opposite of that due to that pressure at home. But it worked out for both my sister and I. I have an older sister, and I don't know if she's thrilled at what she does, given how school systems are operating these days. But, she does good what she does, and she has a good job. And my brother-in-law is a principal. So, but it's not traditional upbringing for the level of education my parents have. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I love that, man. It just sounds like, your parents really just kind of gave you the leeway to pursue what you want to pursue, which, I think that's not always the case growing up. So that's cool. So obviously, again, going back to the motocross, you said you turned pro when you're 21. When you were in high school, then, Chris, did you kind of have a mindset that you were, you were all in with the motocross and that's how you were going to make a living? Were you thinking about college? What was that mindset? And then what did you kind of pursue, outside of motocross post high school?
Yeah, well, high school, I got in a little bit of trouble, for about 2 years. I stopped racing, got in a little bit of trouble. I got sent to military school. My parents weren't messing around. But I was never thinking about college. I was always thinking about within the current time or within the current 6 months or the current year. I wasn't thinking too much long-term wise. I was kind of more into, you could say, more living life in the moment, which we kind of lose as an adult. It was after motocross and after high school is when I kind of started to want to change my mind on a few things. Initially, I didn't want to go to college. I never enjoyed school. I never did. I enjoyed being physical. I enjoyed helping people. I knew that. But after motocross, motocross is expensive. And I was spending a lot of money, all my money racing motocross. I was working as a personal trainer after high school, and I did enjoy that. And, at some point I'm like, man, I got to grow up. I was 21. And once I turned professional, I quit racing motocross, and I'm like, this is not sustainable life. I got to grow up. I got to get my shit together and figure this out. And becoming a personal trainer, I started to become more involved with nutrition because there's a dietitian at the gym I worked at. And I'm like, wow, nutrition's fascinating. And at that time, I just started to take classes at a local community college. And I wanted to do exercise science, be an exercise strength coach, work for a university. And then I'm like, man, nutrition's way more fascinating. So then I changed my major at that time. But I raced nothing but motocross for about a year and a half after high school. That's all I did. I worked crazy hours as much as I could. I started renting. I moved out initially right after high school and then moved back to my parents' house and did chores to pay rent so I could take all my money and put it into racing. And then once I finished that, like I said, I went to college, changed my major to nutrition. And that's kind of where things started to change. I was like, well, motocross is dangerous. I keep breaking bones every year. I can't do this forever. So, and my body hurt. So I'm like, let's stop motocross. Let's get into bodybuilding because I can do that and still go to school. So I was doing that, going to school and working in the hospital. And then that's kind of how it kind of transitioned into, getting into college. And the funny thing is this, is when you're older, you appreciate things more and your perspective changes. So like high school, I was a CB student. I did barely what I could just to get by or get my parents off my back. And then in college, I was practically a straight A student. And I remember my mom being like, are you cheating? And then I'm like, no. She's like, then what were you doing in high school the whole entire time? She's like, I knew you weren't applying yourself because now it mattered. Now I'm like, man, I got to learn how to do this. I want to know how to do this. And that's kind of how that went in school. At 21, my brain just changed. So I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I see a lot of old motocross guys who work at the local motorcycle shop, living in like an 800 square foot apartment, but they still race every day. And that's cool. But that's not what I want. You know what I mean? I wanted a career. I wanted to figure out what I want to do and experience new things.
For sure. Was it last question about motocross and then we'll get off that, but was it hard for you because you were so consumed by it for so long with the motocross? Was it hard for you to give that up, or was it a pretty easy transition because you had so much other stuff kind of going on at the time?
My father is an extremely logical person. Obviously you have to be for being a doctor. And he's good at math because math is all about logic. Right. So I just came to the point where like, it's not sustainable. And that made me change my mind. So I was like, Jesus, I'm 21. I'm breaking one bone a year. I'm getting pretty banged up. It's not like 21 years old is considered young for motocross, right? It's not like I was going to make it. So I was like, you know what? I got to move on. I miss it. I loved it. That was one of the greatest time periods of my life. No question about it. But there's a time to give something up and start something new. And I really had no problem. I actually, it was funny is I finished my second expert race and I call all my motocross friends up. I'm like, hey man, I'm having a sale at my house. I'm selling all 3 bikes. I'm selling all my gear. I'm selling some of my tools, not all my tools, but everything in my trailer. Come over, bring some cash, selling it. And I had 15, 20 people come over and just start, I'll take the goggles, I'll take the helmet, I'll take the bike, and sold everything. And then within a week, I was in an apartment by myself and started bodybuilding and never looked back. And I just kind of jumped right fully into bodybuilding, like see what this is all about and try it out. And then the rest is history. Then I became very involved and infatuated with that because I could do that and still go to school.
Makes sense. So the nutrition side of things, you said there was a registered dietitian at the gym you were training at, and you just kind of found nutrition interesting. What was it about nutrition as opposed to exercise science that kind of like caught your attention or still to this day kind of fascinates you?
Yeah. So real simple. I've been exercising and training my entire life. And I did learn basics of nutrition. I never weighed or measured or bothered to figure out exactly what I needed. And a part of working at the gym, the dietitian ran a fat loss program there. So by default, he has every trainer run the program for 12 weeks as a promotion for that program. So I volunteered. I'm like, I'll do it. It was all free. I did it. And my physique changed super fast, faster in that 12 weeks than it has like the year prior. So from that point, I was like, oh, this is cool. I need to learn more about this. And that's what kind of just steered me completely in the direction of nutrition, how you could change somebody, you can change a body way faster with a great nutrition program and a moderate weightlifting program than you can with a shitty diet and a great training program. So that's how kind of like I just steered in direction fully in that. And plus dietitian work seemed to be a better, more versatile career because you can work in so many different avenues where strength coaches, you got to be really good to be, there's only so many professional teams. Do you know what I mean? And it's not like there's only 1,000 strength coaches in the country. There's hundreds of thousands. So I figured that may not be as versatile. And I might have to be moved or move where the jobs are, which I didn't want to do at the time.
Right, for sure. And a lot like anything else in life with the strength and conditioning, especially as you work your way up, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. And that kind of makes it hard as well. So I want to kind of dive into all things bodybuilding, kind of your competitive side of bodybuilding, kind of your bodybuilding story, and then we'll kind of transition into the coaching and we'll wrap it up there. So talk about like kind of when you started really bodybuilding, like when you were in college and stuff, what was it then about bodybuilding? Kind of the same question about nutrition. What was it about bodybuilding that really kind of pulled you in? I know you said when you started lifting weights when you were younger, you kind of noticed that body change quickly. Was that kind of the main impetus behind you just really enjoying the process of bodybuilding?
You just said it 100% on. It was all about the process. Today's day and age, I hate to say it, most people get into bodybuilding because of validation from others, the materialism that comes with your appearance, feeding that inner narcissism, however you want to say it. For me, I just couldn't believe that I could train and diet a certain way and change the physical appearance of my body. I was never a dude who wore tank tops in the gym, never took pictures either. I didn't care. I 100% did it for myself. And I love the process. I actually like the process 100 times more than stepping on stage. Stepping on stage, shaving and putting on tan, for me is the worst part of bodybuilding. I love the dieting process. I love the bulking process. I love the training. I love seeing my physique change week to week in prep. I love that. And obviously the stage is just basically you're getting a reward for your hard work or your ability to stick with something or your ability to figure out your body and get it into shape. It was kind of like, oh, here's a measure of your progress kind of thing. That's how I thought it, but never really enjoyed it. I was never like, man, I can't wait to be on stage. It's gonna be awesome. It's more like, oh, you had to be at the gym on Monday and start training again, you know? And plus the shaving process, that's probably the part every time. My wife can vouch for this. I'm just like, I'm quit. I'm done. This is stupid. I hate this. My elbows are bleeding. Like I'm not a metro guy. So like when it comes to like that type of maintenance, even if it's like once per year, I just can't stand it. Can't stand it.
Right. Right.
But it was for sure the process in college. And you know, people thought I was weird, but like my teachers would make fun of me. My microbiology teacher, he'd be like, oh, what do you eat today? Because I'd bring in fish to like microbiology, and all my teachers in college were cool. They thought I was funny. I had a cooler on wheels I'd bring around. And some teachers like, you can't eat in here. So I'd leave my cooler outside the front of the door and I would just walk out in the middle of the class for 5 minutes, eat a meal, and then go back into class. But I've never, that's why I always laugh when people go, oh, I can't eat, I'm in school. Really? Because I went 4 years of my undergrad, and I did a 1,300-hour internship, even some rotations in the ICU, and I still figured out how to eat. If you really want to, you'll figure it out.
Right, right. Who were some of your early influences in regards to like the training and the nutrition before you kind of got educated yourself? Who were some of those early influences, maybe a coach or a mentor or somebody at the gym? Who are some of those people that kind of helped you along the way, whether that was like in person or through the magazines or through muscular development online, whatever avenue, but what were some of those or who were some of those early influences, Chris?
The first person who helped me was my sister's ex-boyfriend, Christian Chuli, who was an amateur bodybuilder who was sponsored by ProLab decades ago now. And he helped me in my first show. And then after that, I was very intrigued with Chris Aceto. I know he had his website. Social media didn't exist then. And I tried to get him to diet me, but I'm like a nobody, second show person. But I bought all his books and I read all of his books, and I prepped myself for my second, third, fourth, and fifth show using his books and methodology. And it worked. I mean, I went from placing next to dead last my first show with the help of Chris as a middleweight to winning the light heavyweight class in the open division a year later, like 14 pounds heavier with better condition. So I can't say I had anybody specifically stand out other than his books, because, you know, back in the day, there was no social media. So you didn't have access to like other people's ideologies and what they're doing. And in my local gym, there really wasn't any bodybuilders. You kind of pick up things over time, you know, tidbits from people. I was more intrigued with people's mentality than what people had as a materialistic thing. Like Evan, I became friends with Evan, but I looked and knowing Evan back in the day when we started hanging out and training together in 2008, 2009, his mentality. And I was so intrigued by his kind of, how you say it, headstrong, logical mentality, how he keeps himself on such an even keel under stress, under people saying or trying to give him their 2 cents and trying to direct him, but he would not listen to anybody. Even if those people were considered very respectable industry, he just kept and had almost like he already had a blueprint of what to do. And I was like, man, I'm obsessed with that. Like, I got to learn how to be like that, because being young, sometimes you can get easily influenced in the wrong directions. But he never was. So like, I was very intrigued by that. And I looked up to him. So he was a mentor in that mentality part. He didn't know, but like, I would study him, like his reactions to things, and be like, man, like, dude's bulletproof. Like he doesn't get easily rattled. And a lot of the times I tell people all the time, your ability to succeed in something is really your coping mechanisms and what you can push through and have perseverance against any obstacles that stay in your way. People who are easily derailed by anything in life usually don't get anywhere. It's the people who keep pushing forward no matter what happens are the ones that get the furthest. And I knew that being young. I'm like, man, I keep getting derailed because of this. I got to learn not to react to that. And that's kind of the type of mentality. But the next person who helped me the most, I would say, in regards to opening my eyes to how you really have to train and eat, is Fakhri Mubarak. He was a coach. I mean, I don't think he was even a coach at the time. He was not a head judge. He was a judge at at my 5th show where I got cleaned out. I got like 17th place. And I'm like, man, what am I doing wrong? And all that work and not coming where I need to do. I'm like, I got to hire somebody who's made 20 years of mistakes, so I don't have to make 20 years of mistakes. And I asked him walking in the lobby at Eastern USA's if he would coach me. And he said, no, I don't do that. I'm like, oh, okay. So long story short, we linked up, I think like a month after, and he goes, hey, I think I will help you. And I'm like, okay, how much? And I think it was cheap at the time. It was like $1,000 for the year or whatever it was. And I'm like, done, I sent it to him. And then he gave me this crazy food plan. It was like so much more food than I was used to eating. Changed my training around, and I just followed to the T. And what's really funny about coaching is he kept saying to me, man, you're easy to work with. And I'm like, I don't get it. You just follow directions. So it's like now being as a coach, I understand that now because people just don't follow directions. I wouldn't question anything. If he says check in on Tuesday, 8 a.m., my check-in sent to him at 7:59, like I was just on the ball all the time. And I went from a stage weight of 192 with, you could say 4 weeks out condition to today's standards, to 204 pounds peeled. And then I won the heavyweight class in 6 months. So I put on a substantial amount of muscle mass in only like 3 or 4 months. I never grew like that ever again, but that was the awakening of like, oh, this is what I have to do. And then over the years, it was a slower progression. And then after that, it was, Chris Aceto helped me with my pro show. And then Andrew Vu helped me in my last show. And that's kind of how it was, the progression of who I worked with, who I learned from. But a lot of it was trial and error because most of my progress of muscular size came way before social media.
So that kind of leads me to a question I want to ask you. I'm curious about your opinion, being a successful coach, being an IFBB pro. I had Jose Raymond on the podcast here. I think it was last week. And he's a pretty staunch proponent of, hey, like, especially in the beginning, coach yourself. You need to learn your body, all that stuff before you would ever consider going out and hiring a coach. I've had other, IFBB pros on the podcast, and they're pretty staunch in regards to, hey, get a coach right away. Kind of like what you said. So you don't have to make all these mistakes and you're just going to get that much further ahead. What is kind of your perspective as being a coach, as being an IFBB pro, kind of having the experience in the industry that you have? What is your perspective? What do you suggest for a young listener thinking about getting into bodybuilding? We're all exposed to all these different coaches on Instagram and stuff. And it's kind of overwhelming to where to even like start. Like, should I do it on my own? Should I hire somebody? What's your personal opinion and perspective on that, Chris?
I got a coach. Chris helped me because I had no idea what to do. And I know from racing motocross how good my coach made me. So I was like, man, I kind of want to jump into it, with my, hit the ground, my feet running, So I wanted to hire somebody to kind of get the idea of what I have to do. Once I had the idea I have to do, then I prep myself for many shows. I prep myself for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shows out of 13. I do think it's important. Do I think somebody should prep themselves their first show? No. I think somebody should hire somebody to get them the idea and get them on the right path, and then they can do something themselves. But I think there'd be too many mistakes because there's too much information now. When I first started, there wasn't a lot of information. So anybody putting out information using the internet at that point usually wasn't too far off. Now you have 800 different opinions, which could really mess people up and kind of waste a lot of time, a lot of money. See, in Jose's regard, there wasn't coaches back then. He's been competing for so long, but I do believe there's a lot of value in coaching yourself, learning a little bit about and seeing the process and dealing with the pressure of yourself. Now, as far as like, getting a coach and picking a coach, I can tell you advice-wise, guys, the coach that's on social media constantly is the coach you probably shouldn't be hiring, because you want a coach that's going to pay attention to you. Too many coaches will do preps for free for genetic freaks, put them on their page over and over and over again. And then they'll charge you freaking 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 bucks and let you only email them once per week, not really pay attention because they don't care. They have your money. And then I have so many people come to me with top coaches and they're like, he never emailed me the day of the show. He ghosted me. It was all this money. He only checked in. He took 3 days to respond. That's how it goes. Find somebody who's good. Look at their physiques before and after of just local guys. Don't look at freaks. Freaks are freaks. Freaks can cut out McDonald's and then look shredded. Look at people who have changed look at coaches who have changed someone's physique substantially over a preparation or over a year, and they're amateur guys because you're going to get attention. They're going to pay attention to you. They're going to answer your email within the same day. They're probably not going to cost $2,000. And that's kind of how I think someone should start. There's a major lack of integrity in the industry altogether. So it's really hard to feed through that. But in my opinion, people who are the most flashy, who are spending the most time on the internet, but yet spend 2 to 3 days to get back to an email is the people you don't want to work with. Great advice.
Okay. So I want to get into, if you don't mind, just share a little bit about like your competition history. Cause I just think it's awesome that you have the experience, you have the education, you have the passion, and not only being a competitive professional bodybuilder, but then also the coaching. So you're very well-rounded. And I think a lot of people respect that. And I personally respect that. So that's why I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper. First of all, before we get fully into coaching, your competition history. So we kind of touched on some of those early influences, but just talk about the competition history, talk about turning pro, a little bit of, some of the competitions that you competed in as an IFBB pro, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'll give you a brief rundown of my amateur days. So I can tell everybody, when I first started bodybuilding, my first show, prior to my first show, and even after my first show, I never inspired to be professional. I just wanted to be better each and every time. I never had a conscious thought about, oh man, I got to be professional. I want to do this. I want to be in a magazine. Never. It was, man, I'm going to compete. Okay, great. I got 7th out of 8 people. All right. Well, next time I want to move up. I want to get at least top 3 or top 5. And then I end up winning the second show. Great. I won that show. Won that class. Now I want to win overall, or I want to get bigger and do a more competitive show. And then it was just a stepping stone all through the amateurs. I actually stopped bodybuilding completely in 2009 to go back to finish my school, my internship, because the internship just wasn't possible to compete in bodybuilding because it was 40 hours a week of internship unpaid. And it was half my credits in my master's classes. So it was just, I trained like 3 days a week, barely, and then did all that. And then after, I'd never really had inclination to go back to bodybuilding. So, but I've always been competitive in something my entire life. And I got antsy. And one of my best friends at the time was a professional strongman. And I'm like, dude, help me with a strongman competition. Let's do this. So I did an amateur strongman competition at the under 230 pounds. And I won my division. I chose an event where it was for reps, not for max weight, because reps is something I could do. I could deadlift a 400-pound axle wheel, like 30 reps in 60 seconds, but I couldn't deadlift 700 pounds, So I did that. And then that was December 2011. And then said to my buddy, I'm like, dude, you know what? I think I'm just going to jump to a bodybuilding show and prep myself because I haven't been on the stage in 2009. I feel like I should just like no pressure, just for fun. And I did it just for fun. And I won 2 overalls back to back. So my friend goes, dude, you won 2 overalls back to back. Before you quit bodybuilding, you should at least just attempt a national show. And I'm like, all right, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I'll do one. Maybe I'll do one this year. And I planned to be done. Like I was done. I planned like, you know what, do one national show. Maybe my goal could be top 10, maybe at least top 10. And then I can get out of here and then just move on in my life and do other things. And sure enough, I get there, my buddy, and he's like, hey, I had a flip top phone and he used to rag on me because I'm like anti-technology. And he's like, dude, if you get top 5, you have to get a flat screen. I'm like, all right, dude, whatever. I ended up getting 5th at North Americans and I was done. And David, it's David Bailey, right? I can't think of his name. He used to work for Muscle Development.
David Bay.
Yeah, David Bay, right. And he came over to me and he's like, dude, you look amazing. I think you got overlooked. I feel like you should have been a little higher. You got to do nationals. And I'm like, no, I'm done. And then everybody's messaging me on my flip top being like, dude, you need to do nationals in 3 more months from now. Trust me, you need to do it. I'm like, no, I'm done. So after some thought and talking to Evan, and everybody's like, dude, you're already lean. It's 3 more months. Dude, just do it and be done. And I'm like, I don't know, let me think about it. So I waited a week and then I called Factory because Factory helped me for that. I'm like, all right, Fac, what do you think? He's like, I think you should for sure do it. And all the pressure and everybody else saying that in the forums, like I got overlooked and I should have done it. It would have been nice to be compared with the top 2 guys because I never was. And so I did it. My goal was to place top 5 in that because I knew nationals was generally more competitive. And I ended up winning. So there we are with that. And then I'm like, well, crap, now that I won, maybe I should do one pro show. And then Animal contacted me, or Universal, and they're like, hey, do you want a sponsorship? Would you be interested in representing our products? What do you have to say about our products? Because they liked that I was educated. I could explain people nutrition products based on my background and education, and I was well-spoken. So I said, sure. Well, there's another foot holding you in the door of bodybuilding. And then I did New York Pro, which was my best showing and placing. Showing and placing as a pro. I worked with Chris Aceto. I got 5th. And then ulcerative colitis, because I have ulcerative colitis. My ulcerative colitis got to me, my second pro show. Couldn't carb up right. It was a 2-day show. I looked great at the night show the next day. Prejudging, missed my mark completely. I think I placed like 13th or 12th. And that was a more competitive lineup for sure than the New York Pro. But still, it wasn't at my best on that one. I came in probably a little smaller, not as hard, not as full. And then I took a break, and then injuries just kept happening after that. Hurt my knee really bad. Ulcerative colitis, suffered that really bad for a while. And then just struck with injury after injury. And then I did another pro show years later, which arguably going into it was my best look by a landslide. But as I got older, I just couldn't rebound and make the weight. So 2 days out, weighing 221, best I've ever looked my entire life by far, peeled to the bone everywhere, full, hard, ready to roll. And nationals, I was able to deplete 10 pounds and then fill back up again. Well, I depleted, got all rid of the water to make 212, and then filling back up again, my body just didn't look right. It didn't look awful. It was definitely better than my previous pro showing, but it wasn't enough. And it wasn't nearly the look I had 2 days out before dropping the weight. I always tell people when you mess with fluid balance that much, sometimes it's really hard to get that hard, grainy, full look again, you know? And that's that. And then from there, I'm like 38, my body hurts. I don't want to feel like this anymore. So now I'm not bodybuilding anymore. Doing a little boxing here and there and just experiencing other things and helping other people live their dreams and compete. I love helping people. That's kind of more been my passion, even the last 5 years.
What do you say, bodybuilding kind of just overall, since you started it and kind of stepped away from it, what is bodybuilding kind of given you overall, or what's maybe a lesson or a takeaway just bodybuilding has given you, Chris, do you think?
Okay. This is the thing I tell my clients this all the time. Bodybuilding can make you or destroy you. I've seen it happen to both people in the industry. Bodybuilding has made my life wonderful. It has created everything that I have in my life. Everything. You know what I mean by that is I know in bodybuilding, everything you need to do, nutrition, training, supplementation, everything needs to be spot on, being consistent, disciplined. But I also knew during all that you have to have a certain level of thick skin, heads, being mentally tough. When I say mentally tough, that doesn't mean grinding out one set that's going to last you 10 seconds. I'm talking being able to endure being uncomfortable for a duration of time, learning how to deal with aspects of life, environmental stress, but still being able to make progress, still being able to make your food, still being able to plan, be prepared. I knew that. So over the years in bodybuilding, I had to work a lot on my mental fortitude. I had to work on my outlook. I had to change my perspective. I had to learn to become non-reactive to environmental stress, learn to turn things off, focus on and prioritize things that I needed to do, ensure to make ground during times of being insanely busy. So in all, bodybuilding's made me a better person all around. It's made me a better husband. I know when I'm presented with a problem. I know if my wife comes to me and she's like, hey, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. I don't get defensive. I think about, wow, maybe she's right. I need to be better. Let me figure this out, be more aware, and then work on changing to have a compromise. It's allowed me to have the discipline to carry those things out, because becoming emotionally grounded, emotionally tough, and learning to control your emotions and not act on them is really what helped me succeed in bodybuilding like I did, because I had to, but even more so now with my business, with anything, handling clients, coaching multiple clients. It's not easy, but everything bodybuilding has taught me to be there is transferred into every single aspect of my life now. It's made my whole entire life easy, in that mental change that I've had to partake in over the last 15, 16 years. There's no question about it. And learning balance, because how many people go into bodybuilding and become so obsessive with it that it starts to break down their relationships. It starts to break down their family relationships. They don't perform well at their job, and all these, they isolate themselves. And that's when bodybuilding becomes toxic, because they don't have the adaptability to be able to create balance in their mind. They don't have that ability to have stronger coping skills, become non-reactive to environmental stress. So that's kind of like what I want. I wanted to have a complete, gratifying life. So that's what I developed. And that's what bodybuilding's given me. It's forced me to adopt that mentality.
Cool, man. What's the kind of just that relationship with Universal or Animlpak? What has that kind of helped you do, or what is that relationship like for you, being able to be a part of that brand and that company? I know for me, those Animlpak ads back in the early 2000s in the magazines was just a huge influence. It was like old school, it was hardcore. Frank McGrath and Evan and some of those guys. So what is Animal? What has Universal helped you with, or what has it meant to you to have that sponsorship and that partnership?
It's been really well. Like, I've always looked up to Evan. I trusted Evan because Evan is probably one of the most integral people that I've known growing up in bodybuilding. And he used to always warn me how many people in the industry aren't very good people. So I was always like, oh, okay, I got to keep an eye out for that. And I knew he would never be with a company that was bad. And he always spoke very highly of them, even before that even type of offer was presented to me. So when they offered it to me, I was more than pleased. And, learning more about them and driving down to New Brunswick, New Jersey, meeting everybody, it's very family oriented, and they definitely have a lot of integrity, much more than your typical corporate America or your corporate supplement company, or these horror stories that supplement companies, how they treat their athletes and how they have them sign these clauses where they can't sign with other companies for like 2 years later. And they have to compete X number of times per year. Universal Animal never did any of that to me. And they told me even the first day, they're like, hey, if we make a product that you don't like, you can say you don't like it, and you can say why. If there's a product you do like, we would love if you talked about it. They wanted us to be real. So I love that, because I am a big person of integrity, big on that. And I just can't, I just, those people that it's like, hey, buy this type of watch. And then 2 months later, no, buy this type of watch. It's like, there's no integrity in that. I can't be a part of that. That's not my personality. I just wouldn't feel authentic lying to people just for like a commission check or just because you're being paid. So I love the idea that Animal was like that, and they didn't want me to compete. They just want me to be me, present their products, the ones that I like, talk about them, explain them, answer questions. And that was it. And it's honestly been such, I don't even know how to put this into words. It's been amazing being with them. It's such a privilege to be on that group and that team, and the experiences they've given me and the support they've given me over the years. Like, I'm just forever grateful and in debt to that. It's been an amazing experience, and a lot of things have come from bodybuilding I never thought would come from bodybuilding, all just because I like the process. You know, I tell a lot of guys who's starting bodybuilding, if you truly love the process, then you're going to be good. If you don't love the process, there's a much higher percent chance that you're not going to be any good, because there's so much work involved in bodybuilding versus actual time competing or actual time doing anything else than just the process. And someone can only do a process they don't like for so long.
Right. So one question, kind of like in the spectrum of all the products that Animlpak has out there, what's maybe one product or a couple products that you highly recommend you use yourself, that you would, for listeners, because there's a sea of supplements out there. Every IFBB pro's got, you know, some sort of supplement that they're pushing or putting out there for animal and their integrity and the products they produce. What's a product or two that you would really highly recommend or suggest people check out?
First off, I will say what people don't know is Animal owns their own whole production means of manufacturing their own supplements, meaning they buy their own raw materials. They test their own raw materials for authenticity and contaminants. Then they refine them, put them into bottles and their whole process of formulation. Then they retest them again. Then they retest them a third time with a third-party testing to make sure what is in the label, in the product matches the label. So I thought that was, not many companies do that. They usually all source to the same supplement place manufacturer that makes their products. So I couldn't believe that Animal owns everything to their own production. That's one. So the quality of their products, you can't get any better. But personally, the products that I think are amazing, Animal Meal. Evan created Animal Meal. It's a whole foods-based meal replacement. John Jewett's Animal Pump, what a great pump product, and he helped develop that. Their protein powders in general are top-notch. I have a lot of clients who have digestive issues. They can't digest protein well. And their Animal Whey in the Universal Isolate line, not the Ultra Whey line, the Isolate line, I rarely have any complaints with digestion, and the flavors are great. So as far as digestibility, flavors, those, I haven't had better feedback than that. Some people go with cheaper option. They end up getting like, you know, Dynamatized ISO 100 or IsoPure or any other brands, which some of them are good. But as far as the versatility of the flavors they have, digestibility and quality, because their Animal Whey is a blend, but it has a higher percent of isolate than it does concentrate, where most of the time people just put in way more concentrate because it's cheaper. They do not do that. But they have good other products, like their Animal Omega, the Mega Packs, obviously Animlpak. But personally, for me, the Omegas, I used to use Universal ZMA, their creatine monohydrate, the basic stuff that works. I personally don't get too fancy with all these different types of supplements. I just don't.
Right. Awesome. Okay. We're going to just kind of finish things off kind of on the nutrition and coaching side of things. I want to start with kind of with the big picture. What's kind of the long-term vision or goal that you and your wife have with Tuttle Nutrition?
Tuttle Nutrition was by accident. I never intended to do this for a living. I was going to be a dietitian and work at a hospital. When I first started bodybuilding, once I did my own first show, a guy in my local gym saw how much changes I made from my first year to my second year and asked me how I did that. And I did that for reading Chris Aceto's books. So I told him about the books, but he wasn't interested in reading the books. He just wanted me to help him. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time. So I said, I don't know, dude, give me $50. I'll help you. I helped him. He did well. And then his friend goes, hey, you made good ground last year. What'd you do? Well, this guy at the gym helped me. And he's like, well, do you think he can help me? And that's how it started in 2006. That's how it started. So from 2006 to about 2010, it kept doubling. Never advertised, never marketed myself ever. It was word of mouth. When I went to my internship, I had to get rid of all my clients, but I had to focus. But when I came back, it was like a plethora. People like, Tuttle's back in town. We'll see if he can help me now, get ready for a show. Then I used to help a lot of natural, I still do sometimes, but I used to have a lot of natural athletes that would help compete. And I had like 13 turn pro in INBF and OCB. And then I started prepping a lot of those guys. And then a lot of people at their gyms were like, I don't want to compete, but can you get me in shape? And then by the time it was 2011, I had like 50 clients. And I was doing that on the side, still working at the hospital as a dietitian. And then eventually just kept growing to the point I was like, man, I don't know if I can sustain this. So I was like, wow, I'm making more money doing this coaching on the side than I am at the hospital. Maybe I can actually decide to quit the hospital. So then I quit the hospital and started doing this full time. And then that's when my wife helped me just blow it out of the water. She's like, she's really smart with like finances and stuff like that. She's like, you got to set up a payment system because you have people who haven't been paying you. People owe you like 13 grand. You don't have an LLC. So I'm like, oh, help me establish an LLC and start to become more of a business model. And she helped me with marketing. And then she eventually had her own clients. And that was 2015. And then eventually she quit her job and then we're both home. And then it kept growing. And it still has been growing. And it's to the point now where we get anywhere from 3 to 8 inquiries per day. And we're not taking more clients on because we just can't. I can't work more than 70 hours a week. And just doing what we're doing now, I mean, eventually we obviously don't want to continue to work this many hours, and we enjoy helping people. And obviously, like, you know, it's giving us a good life in regards to like being able to stay home with our dogs and such. But as far as long-term specific goals, we did talk about doing more education and being able to do like more seminars and speaking to people and teaching people, especially about mindset with diet and you're keeping your healthy relationship with food, because that's a big missing aspect of the industry, because how many people have developed eating disorders through bodybuilding, and how many clients that we help after competing, specifically women who are just a mess with their bodies and their image. So more or less lines of education would be something that would be kind of pushing more towards, because again, it is fatigue. I love what we do, but you know, it gets fatiguing sometimes, you know, coaching as many people and being in front of the computer. I always joke with people and I go, I push fitness and nutrition and health, but I'm probably going to die of a DVT because I'm so sedentary all day long. So it's like, I have to like intermittently go for walks or like get a standing desk. I have a standing desk, but get a treadmill desk. So I can just like walk and do work.
For sure. And I love that, man. It's awesome. I think it's always best when things kind of go or become or come to fruition through just kind of the organic means. Okay. So something I really wanted to, I kind of mentioned this before we hit record, a topic I really want to touch on with you. And you mentioned that you have ulcerative colitis, which I believe that ties in with your digestion and gut, correct?
Yeah. It's an IBD. There's IBS and there's IBD, inflammatory bowel syndrome, which kind of constitutes as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, where IBS is slightly different. Okay.
So the topic I really want to touch on with you is kind of the gut health, digestion. Kind of like I mentioned to you before we hit record. The more you listen to bodybuilders talking about, kind of their processes and kind of everything that goes into it on podcasts or their own social media outlets, a lot of people don't really talk about straight up the digestive issues that kind of come along with bodybuilding. But the more bodybuilding content you consume, it does come up because it's a reality. So I just want you to touch on like the importance of gut health, not just as a bodybuilder, but as a human being. And then what can we do as bodybuilders to, make sure our gut health is in check, and kind of like, take that process of being as healthy as we can in terms of digestion, GI, and all of those things as competitive bodybuilders.
I'm going to try to keep this as simple and easy to understand as possible, because digestion and the gut microflora is an extremely complicated thing. In bodybuilding, the reason people get digestive issues is, one, extremely intense training, add on steroid use using androgens, which has been shown to affect digestion. And both have been shown to increase stimulation of your sympathetic nervous system. So when your sympathetic nervous system is kind of taxed, kind of like when you're running high speeds, people say you can't eat a bunch of food and then sprint, right? Because your body is trying to be in the parasympathetic nervous system with digestion. And then all of a sudden you jolt it to the other side and throw up because your body's rejecting that food because it can't process it because it needs the blood to do other things. So that creates altered digestion. In some people, it's altered more than others, where they get symptoms of bloating, digestion, indigestion, acid reflux, as people know it. And when that happens over long periods of time, you can get more systemic inflammation. You get more inflammatory gut. Your body has trouble processing more common foods. Now, what people do is when that starts to happen, I got to add one more thing to that. Overuse of stimulants, pre-workouts also add to that overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. So adding to that pile of affecting your body's ability to digest food. Now, in bodybuilding, you're ingesting large quantities of food. So now you're overwhelming a system that is not at peak optimal performance based on those other three aspects. So what people do is they start to eliminate certain foods. I can't really eat oatmeal, and I can't really eat broccoli, and I can't eat potatoes because they make me feel so full and bloated due to the compromised digestion. Obviously, your body's reacting stronger to the fibers, causing gas. Then they start eating more just chicken, more condiments, spices, which also are harder to break down, can cause gas forming, make you feel crappy. White rice. So basically, they're moving towards a diet that is very, very deficient in prebiotics, which help feed the gut microflora. So now, over a long period of time, you're starving the gut microflora. So now you're further compromising your body's ability to digest food. And there's also some studies suggesting that when you eat foods too repetitively, you don't challenge your gut microflora. So therefore, the bacteria don't become as strong at breaking down food, so to speak, you can say. So now you become even more limited in what you can eat. So now you start staying away from all these foods, nothing eating but white rice, cream of rice, and chicken. And you don't eat vegetables, and you stay with like coconut oil or no oil, and you just eat beef. And people drinking egg whites and doing all these things. And then now you're just in a mess. You've got inflammation on the intestinal tract from all the sources that's causing that, from oversympathetic nervous system stimulation, probably not getting enough sleep. And now you have a diet that has just wreaked havoc on your gut and made it basically, how do you word say it? Basically, your gut has its hands tied. It can't process the food like it once was. So that's kind of how it starts. And then people start throwing all these things at it. Ox bile and prebiotics and probiotic pills and trying to digestive enzymes and doing everything they can to do it. And sometimes you can get some relief from some of these things, but sometimes you don't. It's not a one size fits all. And that's the problem with people digestion is I see a lot of coaches will just go ahead and cross every T, dot every I right off the rip, whether the person needs it or not. It's like, here's ox bile, here's digestive enzymes, take them 5 times a day. Here's this, here's that, take that, avoid this, eat as much as possible. Because that's not individualization. That's just making sure covering all your bases, whether the person needs it or not. And that's kind of how the problem is. So as an individual suffering from those types of issues and disorders, because that type of environment, obviously some people don't have any problem with, but you get a lot of people who do have a problem with it. And some people, it turns into things that I have, ulcerative colitis, where you're shitting blood and mucus 14 times a day. And I don't have digestive issues in my family anywhere. I brought it on myself through bodybuilding. So has many others. So from that point, you got to have to start backpedaling, remove the stimulants, focus on sleep, maybe start cycling your exercises in the gym for a little bit and using exercises that are not as taxing on your CNS. Anybody who's listening to this who has IBD knows after leg day, most of the time you get a flare up. Because of that huge stress in the body, overstimulation of your central nervous system, sympathetic side, your body has a flare up. So removing squats, replacing with hack squats, removing barbell row, doing chest supported T-bar row, removing exercises that stress the body, removing the stimulants, maybe taking a few extra days off, focusing more on sleep, getting rid of high androgenic compounds in the off season, staying with more basic, more mild things, can help you in that environment to heal your gut. This is a process it takes to heal the gut. It's not something that you have to follow forever. And then looking at nutrition, you got to start bringing more variety in nutrition. And the problem with bodybuilders are, as much as they aren't lazy, they are lazy. They shoot for the most convenient thing. That's not going to work in individuals with digestive issues. you have to make sure you have a certain amount of fiber in your diet. And if you have very low fiber, you're going to have to slowly start working your way back into a healthy fiber intake. Once it reaches a certain level, obviously you don't want 100 grams of fiber, but at least if you're at 5, you work your way to 10, then to 15, then to 20, then to 30, then at least get 30 to 40 grams of fiber a day, especially in the off season, considering how many carbohydrates somebody's eating. But including fruits and vegetables, cooking your vegetables to make them more digestible, avoiding certain vegetables that become generally problematic, which is usually Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, but seldomly having those with moderate to small portions is totally fine. Eliminating dry spices, using fresh herbs, basil, cilantro, salt, pepper might be a little problem with somebody with indigestion. Getting rid of the condiments, purchasing oils that are infused, olive oils. There's a lot of companies that make infused olive oils. They have lemon, lime, curry infused olive oils, all different flavors. That's a good way to change your flavor of your food without adding dried onion or garlic that will mess up your stomach or cause gas or bloating. And you will find that once you start to have a diet that's has a little more variety, a little more fiber, you already changed the aspect and addressing issues that overstimulate your sympathetic nervous system. You're working on recovery and rest and eating slower, not being in a rush, not being super anxious. Those all help as well. And then you'll eventually get back to a point where your digestive system will heal. And then you can start implementing those harder exercises. You can start implementing a little more stimulants, push yourself harder, start having a larger quantity and a larger variety of food, and you won't be in that mess. The whole deterioration of the digestive system in bodybuilding, it's not something that happens overnight. It's progressive over a long time. Those who are very sensitive, very anxious people tend to have flare-ups quickly, meaning me. If I have a bad week, stressed, not doing anything that I've learned with nutrition I will start to have signs, warning signs, I call it, of like digestive systems not doing well. Back off, but you can get to that point. I mean, I had a colonoscopy this last year and my gastroenterologist said there's no sign anywhere in your colon that you have ulcerative colitis. That's amazing because I had 2 colonoscopies, 2015, 2016, which both show with biopsy that I have ulcerative colitis. And it was a mess. He goes, it was an absolute mess. So I'm able to heal myself, implementing those changes, managing recovery, managing fatigue, and staying with a balanced diet. Most bodybuilding diets, let's be honest, are not balanced. Bodybuilding is not healthy how people are doing it today. It's just not. And it's coaches who don't know, partially it's they don't care, and the other partially is shooting for convenience. Convenience is never a good thing in the long run. Convenience might help you short run, but being just convenient with foods eventually leads to major problems.
Well put, man. Thanks for sharing that and breaking that down a little bit. The last thing I want to touch on here before we wrap it up, just recently on your Instagram, I don't know if you considered this to be a rant, but it was something that you kind of discussed on a IG live, and it was titled Consistency Within Prep. You touched on sleep, managing stress, beverages, nutrition, and then the 5th one was training. So would you just kind of maybe touch on a little bit what you talked about on that IG live in terms of consistency with prep?
Okay. Yeah. So I had this conversation with some of my friends who are also good coaches, John Jewett and Justin Randall. And we talk about consistency where people might be following a diet. They might be following the training, but they're not doing everything else that's conducive to the preparation, meaning inconsistent meal times, partaking in other events that potentially can be stressful mentally and physical. Say they're going camping, going hiking, staying up late at night, not practicing their posing, being inconsistent with their fluid intake, being inconsistent with their sodium intake, not training the same time of day, just every other variable possible in their daily schedule is all over the place. The only thing that's consistent is they are eating what's on the plan, or they might go 4 days with just eating rice and the next 4 days just eating potato, still the same carbs, and it's still the same calories, but I can tell you people are going to feel much different if they're eating 200, 300 grams of carbs of straight potato versus 300 carbs of straight rice, where you want to be consistent what you're doing with day in and day out. And the main reason is for assessment purposes, because when things are consistent with your sleep schedule, your water, your sodium, you're going to have more consistent trends in your body weight. And when you assess your pictures, you're not going to be really bloated one day and then be flat the next. And then your weight's going to be up here and weight down here. Then it becomes very hard to assess what the actual nutritional changes made we're doing. And that's, I think, one people fail to realize in prep. It's like they're scheduling vacations 5 weeks out. It's like, that's not how it works. And sure, you can live life, you can have balance, and you can do all those things in preparation as long as your expectations match the outcome, right? You can't be like, oh, I'm going on vacation on a ski trip 6 weeks out. I have to improvise at the hotel kitchen, but I'll still weigh it, but it'll be cooked by the chef. And then I got a wedding to go to over here. And then I'm going to bed at varying times, but I want to win. I want to be professional. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. And that's the unfortunate part of preparation people don't understand is that 12 weeks, man, you're locked in. You're doing the same thing every day. You're not doing anything else. Nothing. That's it. And that's what I think a lot of people fail to realize today. That's where a lot of other coaches capitalize on, because you know how some scummy coaches can be. They might be like, oh, you can do all that stuff with me. Come over here with me. I'll give you cheat meals twice per week. I mean, when I first started competing, there was no such thing as a cheat meal. I think I remember going 17 weeks without a single cheat meal with a single refeed. It was just linear decrease in calories, a linear increase in cardio. That was it. I never even thought about it. Now people want cheat meals like twice per week. And that's the other thing. So some of my clients, I do give cheat meals. And the reason being is to increase adherence on plan, because some people mentally just can't do it without having a dirty meal. They can't do a clean refeed. So I might give them a cheat meal and allow it, but they want to change it all the time. Oh, I want to do Chinese this time. I want to do pizza this time. No, I can't do that. Whatever that refeed's going to be, it's got to be consistent. Okay. You pick a place, pick a meal, and that's your meal for that 12 weeks. That way we can have a control, you know? So that's what I mean by consistency. And that's where people don't, and I think sometimes in their mind, they don't even realize it, where you get people where you're like, oh, you measuring your food? Oh yeah, all the time. But in their mind, what they did was they measured it the first week and they figured out that 4 chicken tenders is about 5 ounces. So now every time they measure chicken tenders, they just pull out 4 tenders because they think it's 5 ounces. When we all know that chicken tender sizes vary greatly. Or peanut butter, they will measure it with a tablespoon or measure it in the thing once, and then eventually they'll do a spoonful and be like, that's close enough. And then that's how they're measuring it. I've caught many people with that where I'm like, dude, send me a picture of your food. And I look at him like, bro, that's like 3 tablespoons of peanut butter. And I'm like, measure that on a scale. And he's like, oh, it's 45 grams. Dude, that's way over 15 grams that I want you to have. So that's also the issue too. Sometimes people don't even realize they're being inconsistent because in their mind, they're putting in so much more effort than they were to start. They feel that there should be a reward that comes with that effort when they don't even realize at what level of consistency they really have to be.
Awesome, man. All right, Chris. Are there any kind of last words? We had a pretty thorough conversation. We've been going for over 60 minutes. So is there any last words or any thoughts that you kind of want to leave with the listeners?
No, I just tell everybody, like, just take information with a grain of salt. Just understand bodybuilding and nutrition. There is no black and white. There's a lot of gray. There's more than one way up the mountain. Don't be married to one concept. Have an open mind. But most importantly, with whatever strategy you choose to implement, you got to stick with it for a period of time, at least 12 weeks. Stick with it. I see too many people changing things too quickly, not giving enough time, or they're jumping from coach to coach to coach to coach. It's like, you got to give something time and consistency. If you're finding yourself jump from coach to coach, or you're finding yourself jumping around, you're not getting the results, then the problem is you jumping around, not sticking something long enough to see if it works, because that's how you learn your body. That's important. And I just want to end one more thing to let our listeners know that one thing that a couple of my team members have been working on is we're working on a flavor enhancer, but with a touch of added minerals to it, which will be out shortly. It's very exciting. One of the issues that people have, I see, is they're not drinking enough water, right? And if not drinking enough water, they usually go for these crazy hydration drinks, which doesn't increase your total mLs per day. It just increases your salt content. And we all know that Americans are getting plenty of salt. That's not the issue. The salt is having the incentive to drink a fluid that tastes good, that's not going to cause you bloat, not going to rot your teeth, and it's going to be generally healthy for you. But and more importantly, incentivize enough water intake. So that's going to be coming out soon. I'll let everybody know all about that, and that's pretty exciting.
Awesome. If people want to connect with you on social media, if they want to find out more about products or anything that you're putting out there, information, education, where can people find that information at, Chris?
Yeah, my website's tuttlenutrition.com. I have also a Tuttle Nutrition IG page, which you can see a lot of clients from all different walks of life, not just competitors. And then, of course, my own page, IFBB Pro Chris Tuttle. And you can contact me. Email is always best. Guys, I get tons of DMs every day, and it's very difficult to keep up with so many. I do my best, and I usually always answer everybody, but be respectful. And of course, email is always best. All right, that should be about it.
Cool. All right, Chris, I greatly appreciate you taking some time just to share a little bit of your story and share some of your expertise. It's greatly appreciated.
Awesome. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. I just have one favor to ask all of you listeners. Take this episode with Chris, in which you found a lot of great value in. Share it on all of your social media platforms. Tag Chris. Tag myself at 127fit on Instagram, so that we know that people are listening. They're gaining great value through the podcast, specifically Chris's episode. And I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.